Looks like since I was sitting on the controller, you got to see my presentation already.
You made like a good backdrop video.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. Yeah, I'm not smart enough to time my presentation to the song, so. All right, so let's talk a little bit about Appium. Who has heard of Appium already? Okay, there are a number of people. Has anyone used Appium to automate their tests? Okay, great. So the whole point of Appium is to make the quality of our mobile apps better. That's the whole point of automated testing in general. So if you're here and you don't care about the quality of your mobile apps, you should probably find a different conference. Unless you're getting paid to do it anyway. Yeah, so the reason that we care about Appium is because Appium enables automated testing, and automated testing is the best way to make sure that you have a fast development cycle for your software. This is a diagram that I like to show. It has the aspects of a development cycle, and this is what I call the development cycle of optimal happiness. And something tells me that will translate well into Chinese. So I mean, the basic idea is that you go through all of these steps every time you have an idea for a product or something like that. The part that we care about for this conference is down here, where we talk about some continuous integration server running your tests. So this development cycle of optimal happiness has been available for web applications for a long time, but for mobile applications, this is hard to achieve. One of the reasons it was hard to achieve is because there weren't very good automated testing tools for mobile apps. So we had to do manual testing for mobile apps before, and that meant that we couldn't have a very fast development cycle. But with tools like Appium, we can now run automated tests so that we can have this much faster and much better development cycle. So in sum, this is what Appium is about. It's an automated testing tool for mobile. It works on both large mobile platforms, Android and iOS, and all kinds of apps, native, hybrid, and mobile web. So why does Appium exist? Because there are other tools, of course. You've probably used some other mobile automation tools in the past. We felt that something new needed to exist because we had a very clear idea of how we wanted a mobile automation framework to look. And none of the existing tools looked that way to us. So we started to work on Appium. We have a philosophy called the Appium philosophy, and it has 4 rules that we try to follow when we're building Appium to make it the most awesome framework for you to use in automating your mobile apps. The first point is that we think you should always test the same app that your users are using. So we don't think that it's a good idea for you to test one app but then ship a different app to your users. We also think that it would be silly to force you to write all of your tests in one programming language or one test framework. There are many programming languages, and they all exist for different reasons. Someone might love Java, someone might love Python. I love JavaScript. We should all be able to use the same automation tool from our different languages. We shouldn't be forced to use only one language, because if we're forced to use one language, then I might have to learn a new language, and that will take time and effort that I don't want to spend. We also believe that it's not a good idea to reinvent a new automation API for the same reason as the previous point. There are already existing automation APIs that we can reuse, instead of creating a whole new one that you have to learn and spend time and effort learning. So we chose Selenium WebDriver as our automation API, which I'll talk about in a moment. The fourth point, and this is for me the most important, and I think this is the thing that has brought Appium the most success, is that we think it's important to build Appium as an open source project. We believe that only open source communities will get the kinds of involvement and engagement that this project needs in order to become awesome for everybody. And I think the fact that I'm standing here talking to 150 Chinese developers and testers is a testament to the truth of this philosophy. So Appium supports, as I said before, both platforms, Android and iOS, and all the different kinds of testing that you might want to do. Real devices, as well as simulators and emulators, native, hybrid, and mobile web apps. And this is a little snapshot of where we're at with some community statistics. I pulled these numbers out yesterday, so they should be pretty accurate. We've had a lot of releases in the 2.5+ years that we've been working on Appium. We've had many, many commits. I think even more than this, but this is just the main project. But it's probably closer to 6,000 in all of the Appium projects. Our community has been very active in asking questions, and we've been doing our best to answer those questions or to fix bugs that are raised in those questions. So we've closed 3,000 issues. We've merged almost 2,000 pull requests, and we have a lot of stars and such on GitHub. But what I'm most excited about is that we have so many contributors. So many people have contributed code or documentation to Appium, including some people in this room. So I believe that many of you worked on the Chinese documentation for Appium, and I think some people like Li Hua have even committed some code. So again, I just wanted to say to the tester home community, thank you so much for the Chinese documentation. Did anyone in the audience help with this, with translating this? No? Okay, I think some people last night did. But I wanted again to say thank you to everybody, especially the tester home community who helped make the Appium documentation in Chinese. So you already saw this as I was playing my song. But here are a couple video demos of Appium at work. This is just a kind of simple old example of Appium automating a photo viewing application. So right now it's automating an iOS, I believe, or maybe it's Android. I can't even tell. That's how amazing Appium is. But you can see here, this is a script written in the Python language, and it's using the Appium API in order to automate this application. And once it's done going through one flow, Yeah, so I guess that was Android. So now we're running the exact same test script on an iOS simulator. So the point of this demo is to show how you can have the same test code run on both iOS and Android platforms. It's also demonstrating some common automation behaviors like tapping and swiping, finding elements, interacting with them, and so on. So I think you get the idea. This is another demo. The point of this demo is to demonstrate Appium's mobile web support. So what we're going to do is run a very simple test on both iOS and Android, automating a website in mobile Safari and in Chrome. So this was a very fast, very short test. But you can see it's, again, the same test. Actually, it was just a Selenium test that we're running using Appium. And finally, this is a video that I took with my phone showing how Appium can automate real devices. So this is a Nexus 7 tablet that runs Android, and you can see we're automating the contacts application and going through a relatively complex user flow using Appium on a real device. We also support iOS real devices, but I just have a video of the Android one. So, how is Appium put together? Well, the trick is that Appium tries to do as little as possible. So what we do is we make use of automation technology that has been developed by Apple and Google in order to do the automation. The technology that has been developed by Apple is called Instruments, and they have an API called UI Automation. And together, using Instruments and UI Automation, you can automate iOS applications. So for iOS automation, Appium uses these tools under the hood. For Google, there's another tool called UI Automator, which does the same thing for Android devices. So Appium's Android support is built on top of UI Automator. Of course, UI Automator only works for newer devices, and so for older devices, we use another tool called Selendroid. And we have a couple new automation technologies coming soon. The first is called Droid Driver. It's also made by Google, and it will enable automation of Android apps. Supposedly it's better than UI Automator, maybe even better than Espresso. So we will be integrating Droid Driver into Appium this year, I hope. Also, Apple has released a new automation technology called XCUI Test that will be available starting with iOS 9. And so a beta of this is currently available, and we are working to integrate XCUI Test into Appium. What this means is that Appium will make all of the best automation technologies available to you without you having to learn anything about them. Instead, you can just use Appium. You only have to learn one tool, and you can take advantage of all of these technologies. So this is what I call the automation orchestra. So what we do, we take all of these underlying automation tools and we wrap them up behind a Selenium WebDriver interface. So Selenium WebDriver is an automation API that is very popular. Who has used Selenium in the past? Okay, fair number of people. If you've used Selenium, or if you know anything about it, then you'll be able to use Appium in exactly the same way, because we use the same API. The nice thing about the WebDriver API is that it's just a basic HTTP API, the same kind that you might have as part of your web server or part of your web application. So commands for the automation technologies are made available simply as HTTP requests, and results are sent back as HTTP responses. One of the nice things about WebDriver is that it's becoming an official standard from the W3C, which is the governing body for internet technologies. So we are using this standard because we think that going forward it will be the most widely used API in the world. So specifically, Appium itself is written in Node.js, and it's simply a web server that exposes the WebDriver API. Of course, the WebDriver API was written for web applications, and Appium is for automating mobile applications. And as you probably know, mobile applications are constructed differently and have different features than web applications. For example, location is very important for mobile applications. Interacting with your device using multi-touch gestures is also important. So we needed to extend the protocol with some new behaviors that are specifically for mobile applications. I want to walk around, but I don't want to get in front of the words, so I'll move to the other side for a moment. The leaders of the Appium project are also working with the leaders of the Selenium project so that these new extensions we make to the protocol are incorporated back into the official version of the protocol. The nice thing about this architecture, having an HTTP API with a server and a client, is that we can write a client in any programming language. We can write one in Java, JavaScript, Python, whatever. And this list here is a list of all of the clients that we currently have for Appium. Java, JavaScript, Python, Ruby, PHP, C#, Objective-C, and even Perl. This client and server architecture also means that an Appium server can run locally on your own computer, or it can run somewhere else on the internet. It can be remote. So you could have a grid of Appium servers, all of which are remote to your test machine. Or you could use a third-party service, like the one that my company provides. Inside of Appium, this is the architecture. Basically, if we start on the left, this is your Appium script. This is the test code that you create. And as the commands are executed in your test code, it makes an HTTP request to the Appium server. The Appium server then interprets your request, and it translates the request to the appropriate underlying automation tool. So for example, this is Android, using our UI Automator backend. So Appium will translate your HTTP request into a command that is run inside UI Automator on your device. And then when the result is returned to Appium, it again wraps it up in an HTTP response and replies to your test script where you can do something with the response. Maybe make a verification. Did this run out of battery here? Oh, my computer is trying to connect to a VPN to get away from, I don't know, so it can connect to Google or something. Okay, there we go. So there are a couple different ways that you can begin to use Appium. The requirements for Appium are basically the same as for the development environments that you're trying to automate. So if you're trying to work on an iOS app, then you also need all of the tools that you would need as an iOS app developer. Likewise, for Android, if you want to test an Android app, you need to have the Android developer tools. This makes it a little more complicated than simply using Selenium, because these extra tools are prerequisites for the automation technologies that Appium uses. There are a couple different ways to install Appium. You can simply install from source and build Appium locally and run it using Node.js. Secondly, you can install using npm, which is the Node package manager. Third, you can download the Appium graphical user interface. This is a program that runs on Mac or Windows and gives you a nice point-and-click way of using Appium. This is what the Appium user interface looks like if you download the app. This is on Mac, of course. It just gives you a nice big window where you can see the Appium logs. It enables you to set various options for the Appium server. And it also gives you a tool called the Appium Inspector. This is a tool that Dan built, and he'll be talking to you, I think, after me. What it enables you to do is look at your application from the inside, so you can see the different elements in your application. This is useful for trying to figure out which elements you can automate. There's also another option, which is not to install Appium at all, and instead use a service like Sauce Labs and allow them to manage the Appium servers. So all you need to do is focus on writing your test scripts. So what is the Appium test model? I have some examples here using the Java programming language, but I could have made examples in any other programming language. I picked Java because I figured most people would understand some Java code. So the first concept in writing an Appium test is the concept of desired capabilities. These are a specification for what you want to automate. In this example, we're setting 4 capabilities: platform name, device name, platform version, and browser name. And we have different values for each of them. This will tell the Appium server that we want to automate an iPhone 7.1 simulator, and that we want to automate the Safari web browser. If we wanted to automate a native or hybrid app, we simply use the app capability instead of the browser name capability, and pass in a path to our application. Once we have a desired capabilities object, we use it to start an Appium session. So every test takes place within an Appium session. A session must start and it must end, because the Appium server can only handle one session at a time. So in this example, we're creating a driver object using our capabilities. When you run this line of code, it actually talks to the Appium server, and the Appium server will go through its startup flow and begin a session for you. Then you write all of your test code, and after that, you want to call driver.quit, which ends the session and frees up the Appium server to run a new session. Once you have a session, you want to do something with the elements in your application. That's what your test is all about. In order to do something with an element in your application, first you need to find the element so that you can have a reference to it in your test code. These are different ways that you can find elements. They're called locator strategies, ways of finding an element. Here are some examples. You can find an element by its class, by an XPath locator, which is a representation of the element inside the hierarchy of the app. You can find an element by its ID, for example, by its Android ID, or by its accessibility ID, which is the label that a developer can give to an element to make it usable for a person with disabilities. Once you have a reference to an element, you can interact with it using different methods on the element object. So for example, once I find an element, this one is the username element. So let's say that it's a field where I would type a username. Then I can call sendKeys with a string, and that will input the string into the field. So I can put my username into the field. Likewise, I can find a button, get its text, the label that's on the button, and I can also click or tap the button. So this could be used as part of a flow that tests the login of your application. We might also want to interact with web views if we have hybrid applications. For everyone here, does anyone's company build a hybrid application? A couple of people? Okay, great. Yeah, if you're using something like PhoneGap or Cordova to build your application, then you have a hybrid application, and you want to know about interacting with web views. Basically, what you need to do is get a list from the Appium server of all of the contexts that are available in your application. One of the contexts, for example, will be a web view. You can then switch to that context, and from then on, all of the commands that you send to Appium will be executed inside of the web view. So you can automate your web view the same way that you would automate a web browser using Selenium. It's one of the beautiful things about Appium that we can mix native and web automation in the same test script. Of course, we might want to go back to the native context in our app, and we can always do that by using the context command one more time. There are many other commands that are available on the driver object, some of which are only relevant for Android, some of which are only relevant for iOS. Here are some examples. You can lock the screen, you can shake the device, well, you can simulate shaking the device if you're on iOS. You can rotate the device between portrait and landscape. You can set the geographical location of the device. So you can pass in latitude and longitude, which helps with testing apps that use geolocation. You can also perform complex gestures. For example, swipe, pinch, and zoom, where you can pass in coordinates on the screen to cause Appium to swipe, pinch, or zoom your application. You can also build custom gestures. For example, this is a drag and drop gesture, where we press on one element, move it to the position of another element, and then drop the element. So you can build this using the Gestures API. If you're automating Android, you can also test on multiple devices or multiple emulators at the same time, simply by running multiple Appium servers and passing the appropriate parameters. So in this example, we are running 2 Appium servers with different ports. Now in our test, we can simply point each test file to a different Appium server, and these will run simultaneously. So I want to talk for a moment about scaling your Appium environment. Running Appium in the way I've described is great for local automation and for running one test at a time or a couple tests at a time. But if you're trying to run Appium tests in a CI server, you can have some problems with scaling. So there are other options like Selenium Grid, or the company that I work for called Sauce Labs, which enables you to scale up your Appium servers as much as you need. The reason that you want to scale is illustrated in these 2 diagrams. In this diagram, we have 4 tests, and each test takes a minute to complete. If we're just running one test at a time, then our test suite will take 4 minutes. Now, let's say that we keep writing tests, so we can keep adding tests here. And every test we add will add 1 minute to our build. Which means that if we go towards infinity with the number of tests, we also go towards infinity with the amount of time our build takes. And you don't want an infinitely long build. It doesn't do anything for you. Instead, what you want to do is increase the number of tests that you can run at the same time. That is called concurrency, the number of tests that I'm running at the same time. If I increase concurrency, then my build can stay at a constant time that's very short. So when thinking about scaling your Appium tests, you want to think about how can I increase my concurrency so that your build stays very short and you can get a lot of value out of your build. So that's what Sauce Labs enables you to do. If you have a Sauce Labs account, you can simply change the way that you connect to the Appium server, and the rest of your code can stay exactly the same. We also give you a nice web interface for looking at your Appium tests after they've been completed. So here's a test that I ran on iOS. We get all the commands that were sent, a video, screenshots, and so on. This slide just means that Sauce Labs is secure. For open source projects, if you're running any open source project, you can use Sauce Labs for free. So it's a great way if you have an open source mobile app to have free testing. Also, I made a promotion code for all of you. CNTS 2015 will give you some free testing if you want to check out Sauce. Finally, we're going to be announcing support for real devices very soon. Okay, so that's all about Appium. What about the future of the project? What are we looking forward to? Well, I already mentioned a couple items on our roadmap. For example, Droid Driver and XCUI test. So hopefully those will land this year. Right now, the Appium core team is working very hard on Appium 1.5. And I have this image here because Appium 1.5 is all about re-architecting the insides of Appium. We are completely rewriting the entire server so that it is better tested, more stable, has fewer bugs, and has better code. What we're doing is we're rewriting Appium in a new version of the JavaScript programming language, which is much easier to read and write. So for example, code that used to look like this, which was very hard for people to understand, now looks like this, which is much shorter, a lot less logic, and is much easier to understand. So we're very excited about the new version of Appium, and we believe that it will be much more stable than previous versions. It will also be much more extensible. It will be easier for people to add new features and new functionality to the Appium server. If you want to know more about what we're planning on doing with Appium, you can always check out our milestones on GitHub. We also have a roadmap document. If you simply go to our GitHub page, you can see our roadmap document, which will tell you the projects that are coming up next. This is the milestones page. But also, I want to say that the future of Appium is not just decided by the core team, it's also decided by people like you. There are many ways that you can be involved in Appium as contributors or in some other fashion. So here are some examples. You can write some code. Once we're done with Appium 1.5, please have a look at the code base and see if there's anything that you want to contribute. You can help with our documentation. As many of you already have, translating our docs into Chinese is extreme help for other Chinese speakers who are trying to use Appium. You can share your experiences by writing tutorials and blog posts, or even short tweets to tell people about Appium. You can help with community support. So I believe you're already doing this on the forums of Tester Home, and you have your own Appium community in Chinese. And I've heard that that community is very helpful. So thank you very much for that, and please continue to do that work. You can also let the core team know what's important to focus on. Unless we hear from you what's broken or what your future requests are, we don't know what to work on. So we need to hear from you, from people who are actually working with Appium every day. And as I already said, please keep up the translations. We're going to be completely rewriting our documentation in the coming months to make it easier to read and understand and to help people get started. So we'll need a lot of help translating that to Chinese. Okay, that's the end of my talk, and I'm happy to take questions if we have any time.
第一个问题的话是这样的，就是说刚才也提到了，就是 Appium 就是会支持一些 App Mobile 的自定义的行为，然后为了方便用户去在最上层的调用。那么我想问一下，就是因为很有可能有些 Mobile 行为的话，特别是当某些 App 开发的时候，它会有自己的自定义行为。那么可不可能 Appium 那边它提供一个接口，可以让程序员的话在里面定义他们的行为，然后去做解释？这个就有点类似于 Carbash Step Definition 类似的东西，我不知道会不会有这样一个设置。这是第一个问题。
Are you asking whether you, as a developer, can add new behaviors to Appium?
Right, some behaviors to translate the code into the real code inside Appium and do some combinations.
I think the only way you can do that is by downloading the Appium source code and changing it. But with the new version of Appium, it will be very easy to add extensions.
Yeah.
But you still need to program in Node.js, in the language that Appium is written.
Only Node.js?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you can ensure the extension can be supported in the future releases.
Are you asking if Appium can generate test code for UI automation or UI automator?
I think Appium can generate test code for that. Just I need to add some customized behaviors. So I don't want to write duplicate code times by times. Maybe I just write one line of code, and maybe based on the extension of Appium, it can translate it into the designating steps. Yes, there's something supported in Appium.
Well, I may not be understanding you, but it sounds like this is something that you can simply do in your client code. Like if you don't want to repeat a test step, why not just abstract it?
That's one way. That's one way.
Yeah, I think with Appium's architecture, that's the way that we will officially support, because it's better for the Appium server to be very simple, and it's better for people to build client libraries and then share them with each other if there's useful common behaviors that they see.
Okay. So, but you mentioned the extension in Appium. So there are the extension supports, right?
When I said extensions, what I mean, for example, what's a good example? So, yes.
What kind of extension?
Yeah, so the kind of extension I mean is changing the orientation of the device, okay? So this was something that was not a part of the regular Selenium protocol.
Is it possible that to add new features to Appium as extensions? Like the Eclipse plugins, something like that?
Eclipse plugins would only be useful for the Java client.
Yeah. I just use this example, not just to provide the Eclipse plugin for Appium. Just Appium can behavior to support some kind of extension to add new features to Appium.
Yeah, I haven't really thought about that. So I don't really know how to respond, but what I will do is, so basically you're saying, can there be a plugin architecture for the Appium server?
Right.
Yeah.
Is there anything?
Oh, I mean, it seems like a good idea, but no, that doesn't.
Okay, in future.
Yeah, maybe in the future. Thank you.
Yeah, but I have other questions.
Maybe let's let some other people ask, and then we can come back. Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
我有2个问题啊，第一个就是说，我想知道 Sauce Labs 是怎么去部署，然后去帮助一些用户在这个平台上去测这个模拟器，在模拟器上测试的，就是这第一个。然后第二个呢，就是说现在是 Appium 是一个 server 对应一个 client， 对吧？为什么不设计成一个 server 对多个 client， 多个那个 devices 这种 management？ 就是这2个问题。
I'll answer your second question first. That's coming soon. So one of the reasons we're rewriting Appium completely is to make it possible to have multiple tests in one server. So in the future, you can just have one Appium server, and it can run many tests simultaneously. Okay. So we're working on that. Later this year, it should be ready. Your first question, how does using Sauce Labs help the customers? There's a couple reasons. One is it means you don't have to set up your own VMs, your own Appium servers. Instead, you just use the ones in our cloud. The second reason is that it's very easy to scale. So if I decide that I want to run 100 tests at a time, I don't need to go build more VMs. I simply change the number in Sauce Labs. Well, you have to give us some money too, but.
事实上，我是想知道那个 Sauce Labs 是怎么去部署跟那个测试的，就是这个模拟器你们是怎么管理的呢？因为模拟器一旦多了的话，事实上会对那个主机性能会有影响的。我不知道你们是有什么方法来做这样的，因为肯定 Sauce Labs 是很多种模拟器嘛。
I see. So we have one virtual machine per test. So every test has its own virtual machine. There's only ever one simulator or emulator running on it at a time. So they're completely sandboxed from each other.
My question is, because currently Sauce Labs is only support the iOS and Android, and I think most of the companies they want to the application on many devices like Windows Phone and BlackBerry. So is there any plan we can extend our Appium on this platform?
Yeah, that's a good question. So, once Appium 1.5 is written, it will be very easy for somebody who knows about Windows Phone or somebody who knows about BlackBerry to add the automation technology to Appium. But so far, most of the Appium users that I talk to, their companies don't really use Windows Phone or BlackBerry. Maybe it's because I'm in the US. Also Europe, you know, a little bit of Windows Phone. But Dan has worked on Windows Phone support for Appium along with a couple other people. So the technology is there, but it hasn't been integrated completely. So what we need is some people who are passionate about that, who really need it for their job, to come and help us make the integration so that that work can be complete. So the short answer is, no, it's not there yet, but there's nothing preventing us from making it there except time.
我是想问，我很感兴趣，是您是怎么又能代码写得好，又能吉他弹得好，怎么把工作跟生活协调好？然后第二个问题的时候，我想问一下 Sauce Labs 这边，或者说您所了解的公司，他们是怎么看待测试这个职业的重要性？我就这两个问题，谢谢。
I find that having interests outside of work is very important. So I've been playing music for my whole life, and it's something that always helps remind me of what's important to me. So I don't know why I decided to mix guitar and code, but it works for me. Your second question about how do companies that I know see testing. Testing is very popular, very important. Many companies insist on writing automated tests for all the products that they make. We're in a bit of a transition. Some companies have developers and testers, and they're different careers. What I'm seeing more is developers and testers are the same people. I think, and I like this because I think that writing good tests requires good software development skills. If you don't have good software development skills, as an automated tester, you might not write the best tests. Also, if you're a good developer, it means thinking like a tester, making sure that you're thinking about quality, not just code. So I think that testers and developers can really help each other, and it's the best when they become the same people. But I know that that's not always possible. I also do think that sometimes, it's important to manually test your applications. But since I work on an automated testing tool, I do believe that automated testing is more satisfying than manual testing because it allows you to be creative in writing code to determine your test steps. And I think that's a lot of fun. So I think that testers should become developers, and developers should become testers.
Thank you.